speed is nice. Like if I just hold the leaf slam button down, it goes pretty bloody fast. The movement speed's kind of shit, but
Yeah.
that's what leaf slam's for, I guess. The damage while actually clearing, but even though it's like looking like it one-shots everything, the damage is actually nowhere near to what the top end damage is. Because everything dies so fast, I don't get a chance to stack up the trauma stacks. So it's like, here, just check these. I'm going to chuck a live tap in here to just demonstrate the speed of what it looks like when I hold the button down. I don't have the mana to sustain it when I'm not hitting a monster, so. But it just looks stupid. And look at my health going down.
Yeah.
What is the build? We are both a strength and deck stacking Pillar of the Caged God build. The core concept is that this stuff here gives a whole bunch of weapon physical damage per 10 strength. So you see 16%. But when you go ahead and do the math, right, at near 2000 strength, it sort of equates to around 3000% increased weapon physical damage, right? But the problem is that because it's weapon physical damage, and the stuff itself has basically very, very little flat damage, it needs to be scaled by flat damage. So we are actually choosing to get all of our flat damage, basically all of it, solely from trauma support. It's very similar to Bone Shatter. It has the same mechanic where you're getting stacks of trauma and they hit yourself and they ramp up in damage. And so you ramp up in the damage you take dramatically. And if you're not fixing that, you can very quickly kill yourself. Especially if, according to PoB, I'll pull up the numbers real quick, we're attacking at 23 times a second, basically. It's going to stack up trauma very fast. And that's partly why I have chosen to keep it at level 17. Anyway, so the core concept is, why go dexterity stacking as well? So we got the basic idea. You stack a whole bunch of strength, you get the flat from trauma, whoop-de-doo, doesn't seem that cool. But why dex stacking as well?
Yep.
Well, the stuff itself gives it's an okay line. 1% increased attack speed per 10 dex, and with 1500 dex, that equates to 150% increase in attack speed, which is not bad. It's definitely like a major boost to attack speed. But part of the reason why this is sort of actually really good to invest in, and if you look at PoB, you'll see that if I hover over this dexterity node, that's equating to 15 million DPS, and then as comparison, the strength one is only slightly better at 21. So it's like they actually are similar levels of DPS.
Can you just zoom out of this tree? Sorry.
Yeah, I really like the look of it. Look at this tree. It's beautiful. I call it the snail because it kind of looks like a snail.
Oh, God.
It's got the little antenna. Anyway, I'm actually really happy with this tree. I'll just explain it. Basically, the idea is, if we're going out of our way to stack strength and dex, as I've proven, part of the reason why I've gone up here and made it look kind of weird is because of this keystone here, Mage Bane. You get 1% chance to suppress damage per 15 dex, right?
Oh,
and because
nice.
I've just hit over 1500, we are literally 100% chance to suppress, and I have 0% chance to suppress on any of my gear or on the passive tree. It's all coming from this, which is just beautiful. We get decent damage from dex. We get decent defense. But going back to the whole concept of why attack speed is important and why dexterity is actually a decent investment avenue on this character is because trauma stacks actually has double dipping. It's a source of double dipping. I read a Reddit post and it had a fair few upvotes, so I'm hope he's correct. Anyway, he was saying that attack speed on trauma is equivalent to double dipping mechanics, and it makes sense, right? Because the attack speed is increasing the amount of trauma stacks you get, and is also, the attack speed itself is a damage multiplier itself. So it's like it's a sort of a double dipping mechanic. The way the Reddit post defined it was quadratic scaling, apparently. So anyway, that sounds kind of cool. But the point is that you need to have decent investment in speed for it to be
worthwhile,
and that's why we are going double striker momentum. It has a bunch of % more attack speed for each stage.
Yeah.
And when we link that with Enhance, which is definitely one of the best in-slot supports for this character,
Hmm.
you get a whole bunch of extra quality, 21% more for each stage. So that's a whole bunch of more attack speed.
Just random quick question. What's the
Yeah, you go.
orange line? I've never seen that
Ah,
before.
the orange line. It's beautiful, isn't it? So the whole reason why it looks so stupid, I'm going up like this and then all around, is because of these jewels here. They're called split personality, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep. And they say this jewel has 25% increased effect per allocated passive between it and the class's starting location. So the whole concept is you want to make as long as line as
Nice long
possible
line.
away from it. And that's why I've gone up this direction here, which is actually because it lets you go through
That's
here
efficient.
and still
Yeah.
be a long line. And this nodes here is actually quite nice with attack speed and strength. Yeah, so that's basically the sort of the core concept. But there's some really interesting things that can happen when you're scaling, and the synergies of working together of scaling both dex and strength. Yeah, I'll explain a few of those right now. So Shaper's Touch is absolutely insane on this build. We are getting, as you can see, where is it? One life
Yeah. Yeah.
per 4 dex. So
Makes sense.
this equates to around 300 flat life, which is
Yeah.
very nice. The energy shield per strength is massive too. So that equates to around 300%. Yeah. So check this out. So we got
That's pretty good.
6,300 unreserved, 5,800 when reserved, and then 3,000. And you can see what happens if I take off
Mm.
the Shaper's Touch. Is like
Yeah. Drops
we
your ES
ES
completely.
just like completely
200.
halves,
Just
and
hit
then
2
and
minutes.
so our life also goes down massively too. The reason why we have this ES in the first place, we got a small amount from the Doriani's prototype, and I'll explain a little bit about why I'm using this in a second. So
Mm.
to offset trauma, basically a mandatory keystone, in my opinion, is Corrupted Soul. Trauma stacking, and the reason why we can actually sustain this shit, because you're probably thinking, right, okay, 20 attacks per second trauma at level 17, sorry, you're not gonna live. Well,
Yeah.
actually, through Corrupted Soul and through the Juggernaut's regen 1.5% of damage prevented, that plus Corrupted Soul plus Divine Shield, 3% of
Yeah.
physical damage prevented is regen.
Mm.
What Corrupted
It's really
Soul does
tidy
is
skill
it
tree.
gives you a whole bunch of extra ES, which is a nice bonus, but really the downside is actually the important part for this build. And the downside is what enabling us to split the hit pools into both is very important for allowing us to both take advantage of Divine Shield and the Juggernaut's Untiring at the same time. And that is essentially, with those both working together, it essentially allows you to offset any amount of trauma that isn't going to actually one shot your character. Any amount of stacks up to the point it will one shot me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many stacks I get, because these regenerating sources will instantly put me back up no matter how fast I'm attacking. Like even if it's 30 attacks per second, it doesn't matter so long as you can prevent enough of the damage. And that's actually not the only avenue to make these mechanics work better. Another one is obviously increasing the rate. So any sort of energy shield recovery rate helps Divine Shield, and then
Yeah.
life regeneration rate helps this one, as well as life recovery rate, and they're both multipliers together. So
Yeah.
so what you need to do if you're a build and you're not playing this build and you just want to know how do I offset ridiculous amounts of trauma, that's your answer. You need to invest into splitting both of these. You need to invest in preventing as much physical damage as possible. And by the way these mechanics work is if you convert the damage type to another, it doesn't count as physical damage prevented. Really, you need to prevent as much physical damage as possible. And I'll explain a big part of how I'm doing that. Yeah.
What's the little up on your cluster jewel on the top left? There's that little like random passive keystone thing sitting next to it.
Yes. This one. That
Yeah.
that that actually was segues into what I was about explaining about the physical damage prevention. So there
Okay.
is
Yeah.
a anoint called persistence. The way this works, I've had to actually go through Reddit replies from Mark to understand this correctly and confirm it, because it's not really well explained in the
Mhm.
wikis. But essentially, it takes off physical damage from hit. But what was I was trying to answer was when in the calculation, and
Mm.
it takes it off after armor,
Of course, you work this out.
but before physical
Destroy me.
damage reduction. So this is
Yep.
very important. So
Did you
physical.
update the wiki?
No, I don't have permission to do that. Anyway, the whole reason why this is important knowledge is because it tells us that if you want to take advantage of persistence, and essentially what this is doing is I get 110 physical damage prevented from each hit, right? But the way it works is because it's after armor, if we can reduce the damage from armor by 90% with a whole bunch of armor, then what actually happens is, say the trauma hit self damage was 1000 damage, right? And then we reduce it by 90% with our armor before this persistence hits. Okay, so now we've reduced it from 1000 to 100, right? Very easy math. And then now this flat applies and it goes from 100 to 0 damage, and therefore we've prevented all of it. And why is that important? Because these powerful recovery
Mm,
nodes on the Juggernaut and Divine Shield want you to prevent as much as possible. If you want to offset all of the trauma, you need to prevent as much as possible. And so that's why we've gone persistence. This combo here was actually a lot better in a previous version of this build when I had a body armor that actually had a decent amount of armor. You see, I've
mm,
kind of I'll explain the variation that I've done to this build with Doriona's prototype in a bit. But basically, ideally, you don't do this and you take advantage of Unbreakable and get double amount of armor, and you just get a crap ton of armor, and it just means
mm,
you can offset trauma like there's no problem. But really, I'm already at that point anyway, so I don't need to go over the top with recovering trauma. If you follow the logic I've been explaining, it's surprisingly easy to sustain any amount of trauma,
yep.
except for obviously an amount that one shots you. And you
Mm,
don't really want to put the stacks if it cuts your HP pool by about a quarter, because what's happening is it's like flickering up and down,
yep.
and it just means if the boss hits you in the same frame
Yeah,
that the
the
flicker's
timing.
down,
Yeah. Yep.
then it's just like, yeah, you don't really want it, and that's why I've left it at level 17. So
I
I've
feel
left it.
like there's a layer of jank missing here. Where is it?
Well, I guess the Doriani's prototype variation is what makes it interesting, really. Is that
Yeah, okay. Something like a
well,
different way.
the whole reason why I've decided to go Doriani's prototype. I accidentally made this ring here. It's absolutely nutty ring. In my attempts to make a high strength and dex ring, I was chucking it in the mirroring machine, and I accidentally made this, and it says negative 121 lightning res, and I was like, oh, that's going to be so hard to fix. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, but Dorio's prototype, I was like, yeah, but how do I make that work in this build? Well, I guess I can make it work. And then I looked into it a bit further. I was like, you know what? It actually works really well. Yeah,
Mm,
it works pretty decently. So because I can use physical to lightning support, so that already converts
yeah.
50%. So that's a good start. If you don't know, the way Dorio's prototype works is that nearby enemies have lightning resistance equal to yours. Armor also applies, right? And because we're wanting to invest into high armor because of persistence, then
Really
it
nicely.
offsets the lightning damage, and then armor also offsets chaos damage. So armor is
That's
a little bit
cool.
important, but it is a little bit hard to get a decent armor pool. I've only got determination on just because I was very squeezed for auras, but ideally you have determination and grace. You see, I've got iron
Yeah.
reflexes here, so iron reflexes
Oh
is
yeah, yeah.
really important in this because like you can take advantage of the really high armor and evasion bases. Just
Hmm.
while I'm on this helmet, this is a very powerful helmet, and it says 1% increased critical strike chance per 10 strength and gain accuracy rating equal to your strength. Right? An important part of strength stacking is actually taking advantage of the shit like this. Believe it or not, though, if you look at most strength stackers, they often go around of Crown of Eyes and Iron Will. However,
Mm,
in this case, we've already got an abundance of percent increased damage. So going down here and taking Iron Will and then replacing this Helm slot, which is very powerful with Crown of Eyes, is actually not the go. Like we
yeah,
don't
okay.
we have enough percent increase where this is actually better, and it's
Mm,
nice because it means we don't have to run a crappy unique helmet. I want to explain a bit more while I was talking about accuracy rating, right? And
yeah.
so Juggernaut obviously has this really powerful attack speed node. And remember how we said trauma is quadratic scaling, right? So attack speed
Yes.
is very powerful, right? Well, this node here is ridiculous amounts of attack speed from accuracy rating, right? And
Mm.
because it also says gain accuracy rating equal to twice your strength. So we're a strength stacker. We're getting a
Yeah.
whole
Okay.
bunch of accuracy from strength, and we get a whole bunch of accuracy from strength here again from this one.
This
But wait
the
for it, right?
synergies in this build are insane. Yeah.
Dexterity also gives a whole bunch of accuracy. So it's like we've got all this flat accuracy, and there's not even a single point invested
Mm.
into percent increase accuracy. So what's going on there, right? I
Efficient.
know in other strength stacking builds, another creator, Connor Converse, he just made a really powerful strength stacking build, and I've actually taken inspiration a little bit from it regarding like taking advantage of the accuracy stacking, right? But he would turn his dexterity nodes into percent accuracy, which is quite
Yep.
powerful for his version of the build. But we're trying to stack dexterity, so it's not ideal to swap that, right? So
Yep.
our percent accuracy is actually coming from the new war banner here, and this is where a little bit of the jank comes in, Jake, so you'll be happy about this. War banner, they reworked in this league, and it says 4% more physical damage. Other strength stackers can't really use this because they don't take advantage at all from the percent more physical damage. All the other strength stackers are either getting flat fire, and then converting that to chaos, or they're getting just
Mm.
the chaos from the strength stacking boots, right? They gives flat chaos per strength. But we're getting all of our damage from flat fizz from trauma. We're also getting that, but we're also getting the 8% increased physical damage. And now you got to understand that this is actually 10% more aura effect per Valor. We're one of the very few builds that
Right.
can take advantage of both. Most builds aren't going to want to increase accuracy rating more than what they need, except for the Enemy Marauder that takes this undeniable here. But then, most of those builds are probably using some sort of elemental. So this build's probably the very small situation where we can take advantage of both. And
Yeah.
so
Nice.
therefore, and just to prove my point, I'm going to PoB here, right? So this is the DPS, 191, right? And this
Yeah.
is, I haven't tried to min-max the damage. I've put a lot of focus into defense, right?
Yeah.
Now, what happens when I untick the banner, right? Bam, half the damage. The reason why we've actually invested a bit into the banners here, right? So we've gotten all the extra valors. And now
Mm.
what I'm actually doing to give this a decent uptime, so we've proven that it's worthy of the investment. So to give it a decent uptime, 5 valor whenever you war cry, right? And this is
Yep.
actually unfortunate. It's the case where, in my opinion, banners are shit uptime unless you take this notable, which is really strange. It's like the amount of valor you get on hit and on kill is just so minuscule that it's just really shit that you have to kind of invest in it. This is the only other way to get valor apart from the
Mm.
base method. It's really bad. I really didn't want to have to invest into this, but I have to. We're using 2 war cries. I'm using Ancestral Cry, which is, not bad for mapping. It gives us 2 additional targets. So that plus the Ancestral Call, decent amount of additional targets. And obviously the exerts won't last very long at all. However, when we're mapping, we just basically jump around and press the button once and the mobs die, right? It's just literally a mapping utility. Another option you can do is General's Cry, which has a lower cooldown, which is essentially does nothing except for give me valor. So
Mhm.
that's what the General's Cry would do. But I've actually opted to go Intimidating Cry. It says double damage, but it only exerts twice, right? So the only reason why I've gone into this one is that my theory is that this probably comes in handy on single target when I'm trying to inflict a big shock. If it helps give it a bigger shock, then maybe it's justified that. But really, I just need 2 war cries spamming to give some
Yep.
sort of amount of valor happening, right? They'll tick over and they just grant like 10 valor over there. And if
Yeah.
it was the case where I had, and that slowly ramps up, especially when you get a little bit from the extra on hit and shit. Slowly ramps
Yep.
up, and then if you're at an invulnerable phase, and then hopefully you get to the max. Now I want to explain a bit about Doriani's prototype and how I sort of made it work and shit. So, very powerful chest made possible by this ring that probably hard to replicate. But if you chucked in some rings like this, tier 1 strength and tier 1 dex, and then crafted on some lightning res, or just spammed until you had lightning res, and then if you had any other res too, you can use harvest to convert it to lightning. I highly recommend that if you're trying to cook these rings, because In a small situation where someone happens to be making a Doriani's prototype niche build as well, you might as well, if you're going to make a resistance negative, you might as well make it lightning negative. And then we're reflecting that obviously with Calandra's Touch, which reflects that. So I've got 2 of these on. That's how we get negative 200. And I've actually got, on this version of the build with no Mage Blood, it's actually quite challenging to get our reses capped. And you see I'm actually 1% off with my cold when I don't have the flasks on. But obviously when I'm mapping these, even in bosses, I'm always getting hit. Like these are basically always on. So a min-max version of this character would have Mage Blood. I've tried to keep it no Mage Blood just to prove that it can be done. This build's actually quite decent too, so it gives a whole bunch of strength and attributes. So really, we're trying to scale strength and dex at the same time. Percent
What's
attributes
your
is king. Another important line is actually the life recovery rate. So that's a multiplier to the life recovery from this node here. So it's just like very powerful. It just helped to get closer to being able to permanently sustain trauma. So
what's your amulet?
Big one. So insane Eyes of the Great Wolf. This is essentially, and I've actually got 2 of these, right? So here's another thing I wanted to explain. If you look at my POB, you'll see that massive fire max hit, massive cold max hit, lightning res max hit is pretty bad. But for cases where I know there's not going to be massive lightning damage, as soon as I know there's going to be lightning damage, I swap over to this one. And this one essentially solves that problem entirely. So it says 100% of lightning damage taken from hits taken as fire. But yeah, most of the time I've been using this life one, which is obviously just really nice. So more into the point of recovery rate. Another point of investing into it is life regeneration rate on the boots. So I've gone ahead and sacrificed a suffix, and you got to keep in mind is that every suffix is extremely valuable in this build because we are as resistance starved due to needing attributes everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So we want dex and strength. So it's like we are really starved on resistance. So the fact that I've put life regeneration rate here just goes to show how powerful it is, or how important it is to sustain the trauma, and how much important it is to boost these mechanics here.
Yep.
That's essentially the gear. Yeah.
So what
I've shown the helmet, shown the.
What are the jewels and stuff you got in your tree?
Yes. So now I'll explain a bit. So I've got a whole bunch of reserves, right? Oh, so I need to explain why Wrath. So Wrath just gives a small amount of flat damage, right? It's really bad, and it's a shame that I can't figure out a cleaner way to convert to lightning without giving up the glove slot. The Watcher's Eye here, I get 40% physical converted to lightning. So it also says deal no non-lightning damage. So only lightning damage deals damage, right? So my 50% converted from fizz to lightning, and my 40%, I'm actually missing 10%. But what you can do, and this is what I did before I got this really nutty Watcher's Eye, is you can get a Glorious Vanity. There are Glorious Vanity passives that convert 10%, and you can actually get a bunch of them and stack it up to about 80% converted this way. That's a way to do it, right? And so this one had, 10% converted here, 10% converted here.
Yeah, okay.
And what I was actually doing, right, is I had these 10% all in the radius of this keystone here, and I was using the possible escape jewel to allocate them from this passive here in a radius, so I could just straight up allocate these, and these were all converted there. Now let me explain a little bit. This is actually a very important part of the build and how I'm fixing mana, and this is the leech. So this passive here is actually kind of nice. This small passive here is where I'm getting all of my life and mana percent leech from this small passive here, because I've actually gone ahead and used the this one to get extra fire res and max res. And the reason why is that, like I said, I'm just starved for reses. But the whole point of me going down this here is just for the mastery for 10% instant, right?
Yeah.
So I've gone here and done that and got this extra res, which is nice, just for the instant leech. This is how I'm solving mana. So I bet this build has a few flaws, a few weaknesses. Can't do no regen, obviously, because it will kill ourselves very quickly with trauma. And we can't do no leech. So that's one downside to this build, is it has a few map mods that are weaknesses to it. So it definitely loses points for that. And the reason why I've gone into using leech as a fixing for mana is because I tried to do like reduced mana, minus mana, clarity. I still got minus mana here, but that was a remnants from when I was trying to fix it another way. The problem is that because I couldn't get it on the ring slot or the amulet slot, the minus mana, it's too hard. Even with
Mm.
inspiration, it was too hard to reduce it to 0 essentially, which is what I needed it to be. With 10% mana leech, whenever I attack, it's full, which
Yeah.
is nice. So I can permanently sustain mana when I'm leeching, which is nice. But the instant leech is actually just nice to keep your ES pool and life pool up before both of these have kicked in. And you see, like, this is over 10 seconds, and this is over 4 seconds. So at the start of maps and at the start of boss fights, they haven't really kicked in yet, and the trauma stacks haven't kicked in yet. And so you are a little bit more susceptible to low recovery at those instances. If you've started attacking for about 3 or 4 seconds, you are basically immortal to anything that's not a one shot just because of the recovery. This is the one big upside to this build versus having immortal recovery from on hit, is that our immortal on hit recovery actually has a sort of duration style effect, right? Because these effects last for a duration, and we're hitting
Yeah.
ourselves so hard. One annoying downside with Doriani's prototype is lightning dots. These are slightly offset by these like massive recovery nodes, you know. It's like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't have to constantly be attacking things to offset the lightning dots because these things here can kick in and keep us topped up. I'm actually very starved for passive points. I took this endurance charge out, and
Yeah.
that's how starved I am. And I've even took out 2 life here. So if I had 4 more points, they'd go right here. This is obviously mandatory. Unfortunately, it's kind of wasted because we don't need any percent damage, but we really need the strikes,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
melee splash, and
Makes
our
sense.
anoint's taken up, so we can't really anoint it. We kind of do want this mastery too, which is another additional nearby. So it's like we kind of have to waste a couple points here. This one's actually kind of nice. You get a whole
Oh
bunch of
yeah.
flat armor for 2 strengths. So obviously, strength stack could take advantage of that. And we, like I said before, armor is important. So I was talking about instant leech. What I forgot to mention is, so the instant leech is nice to keep our life topped up and our mana topped up, but we can also take advantage of ES leech. And I've actually looked at PoEDB, and as far as I'm aware,
Mm.
the only source of ES leech that is not from spells is this cluster here for lightning damage. 0.5% of lightning damage is least as energy shield, right? And so that means we can also get instant leech for life, ES, and mana. So you can see it's definitely worth going down here to get
That
the
is such a
10% instant leech. So
tidy,
that essentially
tidy
means
like
what that
synergy.
means is that like we are always topped up whenever we
Yeah.
attack, essentially. So that is the whole reason why we're going this, because ideally we'd probably want another one of these instead, like graceful execution, really nice.
Mm.
This is a very efficient node because it gives dex and a bit of int, which we actually need to help us equip the auras. But the accuracy rating, so this is actually our one source of percent increased accuracy rating outside of the war banner. And
Yeah.
then the crit strike chance is nice. Attack speed, very important. Quadratic Australian, yeah. We get it. And then it's the main weakness to this build, the clear. So it's like it's got the speed, it's got the damage, it's got the defense. It doesn't have the whole
Yeah.
screen clear. That's definitely the biggest grab. And so I've actually gone a little bit out of my way, taking the Devastator here and Devastator over here. This one's actually a very important cluster too because we get Overlord, which lets us get 4 to 5 for almost free, right? If you've gone down the rabbit hole of attribute stackers, you'll know that a very efficient way to get decent amount of attributes is from small cluster jewels, but this is also a very expensive way. So this build by no means is cheap. Unfortunately, it's the case. If you don't have to go this way and scale it with small cluster
Yeah.
jewels. It is both efficient and I very much needed reduced mana reservation. So these ones here, and I'm also getting um, fixing shit like chaos res and fire res and shit with this
Mm.
shit. So you can see
What
here that each point here is giving a whole bunch of attributes and mana
Yeah.
res. It's like way more efficient than what you could get, which is why I haven't gotten to any of the aura shit here. It's like I just get more value from these.
Yeah.
One other thing I forgot to mention why our attack speed's so high Blitz charges are the Berserker's node Blitz, and the way that works is you get 2% more attack speed, so that's a multiplier to attack speed per Blitz charge, and you can have up to 20 of those, and that's 2% each, so that's 40% more attack speed, right? And I don't want to keep repeating myself, but like I said, attack speed is quadratic scaling. So here's another very important thing that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is Immortal Call. So cast when damage taken, Immortal Call. So why is this so important? So Immortal Call gives you a whole bunch of less physical damage taken per endurance charge removed, and because we're playing Juggernaut with essentially infinite endurance charges, because you get endurance charges when you're hit, and we're constantly hitting ourselves rapidly with trauma. So endurance charges is never going to be a problem with Immortal Call, so they're always going to be up, right? And then we have it on cast when damage taken. So what essentially is the case, this is a nice high level cast when damage taken. Whenever I'm attacking something that is actually a threat, I will hit myself and it will start ramping up trauma to a point where cast when damage taken will start kicking in. The more I ramp up, the quicker this will go into. But essentially, it's like big boss, it'll kick in as it ramps up, and as it's ramping up, that is when I need Immortal Call the most, because it kicks in and massively reduces the physical damage taken, which means it helps the Untiring and the Divine Shield kick in and gives them a bit of extra buffering time before they start really kicking in and overtaking the trauma. But really, it's just like it's just helpful as you to kickstart you into becoming immortal over time. Yeah, I mean you're already immortal from the Leech anyway, but it's just like it's like a nice added layer, and it adds a huge amount of effective. And because we can like essentially constantly have it going on when we need it with cast when damage taken, that's why I haven't put it with automate, because with cast when damage taken, it's sort of reserved for when I actually want it to start kicking in. So it works perfectly timed then. And then I've also put in Assassin's Mark this way, without putting in Assassin's Mark on Hit Gem. The mark on Hit Gem, it reduces the effectiveness of your curses. See here, it says reduced effect of marked curses. So with cast when damage taken, it has no such penalty. So, and then Blood Rage, obviously just attack speed, powerful. This is our only source of frenzy charges. So I have not ticked frenzy charges for this damage here, because they'll be on during mapping, but you know they're not technically on for bossing DPS, so I've unticked that. A bit of explanation to this DPS. This DPS is assuming you have the trauma stack. So if you don't put in manually here, it'll figure out what the trauma stacks are based on your attack speed, right? And so theoretically, this DPS is a little bit over stated, because it is assuming you've been attacking for trauma duration, which is 6.6 seconds. So this is the DPS after 6.6 seconds. 6 seconds. But that effectively means after 3 seconds, we're dealing 100 mil, right? So it's like most things don't even live that long anyway.
Nice.
That is essentially the build. I really like it because it's like it's got
tidy.
a lot of efficient synergies. You know, I love the dual attribute stacking builds. They're just kind of cool, and I like that it's not just like, oh, I've forced it on. And it's very efficient. It's like you get all these percent attributes, and most of the time characters are only using the one of the attributes they're boosting with this. And so we don't need percent increased damage. We got that in abundance, and we actually get a fair bit of percent increase from our Shaper's Touch as well. But it just pales in comparison to the Pillar of God. But that this is nothing to sniff at too. I think this is like it's about 300% increased damage here, which is, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that I already had 3,000, it'd be huge. But you know, it's just a huge amount of life as well. Like these and NES, like can't replace this. What I would say is, if you wanted to make something like this, you don't have to make a Dorian Age prototype. This version here has a lot of downsides. The lightning dots are just very annoying. You will die occasionally to lightning dots.
Yeah.
You can, like I said, swap the lightning max hit if that's your concern. This fixes that problem.
If you weren't running the Dorianis because of that ring you've got, what would your chest be?
It would be a rare with a whole bunch of attributes, and what you can actually get, it'd be a really high, so something like this, where it's just like a huge amount of armor and evasion, less damage per strength, actually probably a better one. This is from a previous version of the build, and you could get like mana reservation efficiency. You can actually get what a new prefix, 38%. I think it's like 38% banner effect. And we've proven how powerful War Banner is. It's like literally double damage. So
Mm,
38% on that is quite
huge.
powerful. So you can get that as a veiled mod um, on armor prefixes now. And that means if you have no life mod, you can take the 15% here. So it kind of offsets not having flat life.
Yeah.
And you can get percent attributes. A non-Doriani's prototype build is still really powerful too, because it would be probably twice as tanky,
Mm,
at least, and it wouldn't have the weaknesses of Dorian's prototype.
yeah.
But it would probably be half the damage. But half of 200 million is still decent. And also, if you didn't run this, you could use shit like Herald of Ash and Hatred. Those are very
Mm,
powerful avenues for scaling physical damage. And Herald of Ash would help the clear a little bit too. So,
it's
what
just
I think
missing
is really,
worms.
it is missing worms.